Shane Stacks on the radio.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
Shall we play a game?
Why, yes. I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Geeky in Little Rock. It's Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks for tuning in, whether you're listening live over the air on 101.1 FM The Answer in Little Rock, or listening live on the Answer's online stream at 1011fmtheanswer.com, or if you're listening by podcast or on YouTube or Krypton Radio or any other ways you're listening delayed after the live show. I'm just glad you're here. We're also we're on the Facebook. We're on Facebook now. Dave Ellswick, go to the Dave Ellswick Show page on Facebook, and he live streams out of his studio with video. So since I broadcast out of that studio on the weekends, we do the same thing. But you have to go to the Dave Ellswick Show homepage on Facebook because that's how it's all set up. So anyway, got a great show today. It is live, so if you want to talk to my guest, you can call 501-823-0965, or you can tweet me at Shane Plays, ShanePlays. Again, that's 501-823-0965, or you can tweet me at Shane Plays. And my guest today, I'm just going to go ahead and cut right to it. This is a extremely cool guest to have on for his history with, I'm sure he's a cool guy in his own right, but for his history in tabletop role-playing games, not only what he's done in the past, but what he's doing now with Troll Lord Games are both very interesting, and I'm very glad to welcome to Shane Plays for the first time, but hopefully not the last, James Ward. James, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me here.
You're welcome by the magic of the Skypes. So I want to ask you, do you prefer to go by James or Jim?
Doesn't matter to me, buddy.
Doesn't matter to you? Okay, I'm going to call you Sir Jim. How does that work? All right. Thanks again for coming on the show. Really, really glad to have you. And for those that don't know, Jim is the man behind Metamorphosis Alpha, which most historians, RPG historians, hold as the first science fiction RPG published by TSR way back in the day. Now, I'm going to ask you, Jim, do you happen to know, is it the first one published, the first science fiction one?
Yes, well, that's my belief. It came out in 1976, just a tad before Traveler.
Okay, so you beat Traveler to the punch. We'll talk more about Metamorphosis Alpha. I actually found a couple of months ago, I got a first printing of the first. There's a local shop that has expanded into retro games, vintage games, used games, and they had that. And I was like, oh yeah, I want that. So I snapped that up really quick, and it was in really good condition. So, and the conceit of we'll get more into it. The conceit of Metamorphosis Alpha is it's like all on one big ship, right?
Yes, that's correct. I call it a dungeon in space.
A dungeon in space. And if that doesn't excite your tabletop RPG gamer heart, I don't know what does. So we'll talk more about that. There's also a very cool new Kickstarter that's just launched in conjunction with a role-playing game company that's near and dear to my heart, which is Troll Lord Games. They're actually right here in Little Rock. I've got a great relationship with Troll Lord Games and Steve Chenault and those folks. In fact, I owe him a duffel full of unmarked Dr. Peppers for putting me in touch with you so quickly for this show, because I really wanted to get you on while the Kickstarter was going on to help you guys out. And you may or may not know that Steve he's a tough man, but if you want to get to his heart, it's with a Dr. Pepper.
Boy, that's the truth, isn't it?
Yeah, so I told him I'd give him a duffel full of unmarked, untraceable Dr. Peppers if he could make this happen. So thanks, Steve. What was that?
You're going to have to do that.
I know. I don't mind. I like those guys. But Steve, if you're listening, thanks so much. And, I hope that for both your sake and Jim's sake that this Kickstarter is going well. And it's Starship Warden, which is it's kind of a continuation of Metamorphosis Alpha. Is that, I mean, really quick, why don't you tell us, the Kickstarter is going on right now, Jim, and after this I want to get it a little bit more in your history with RPG design and development, and you know, just what your passion with Metamorphosis Alpha is, and all of that. But real quick, can you tell us about Starship Warden?
All right. So first of all, the Kickstarter started 2 days ago, and it broke all records for first day sales. I'm very proud.
Are you serious? Fantastic. I wasn't aware of that, so congratulations.
Yes, I'm really pleased. So the Starship Warden, the product that we're doing in the Kickstarter, has 18 different mapped out levels and 16 different mapped out sub-levels between the levels. And it's filled with creatures and mutants and new technology. And basically what happened was mankind went to the stars. They built this big starship that was 50 miles long and 20 miles wide and 7 miles tall. And they packed it with colonists and animals and plants, and they sent it out to the stars. But the bad thing happened. It was going to be a 20-year mission, but in 5 years it went through an unknown radiation cloud, and the radiation screwed up everything on the ship. All of the artificial intelligences went insane. The ship went off course, and for 300 years it's been blasting out in space, not on course. And so you play characters on the ship, either mutants or humans or robots, and you're trying to get the ship back on course.
Okay, so so in case people don't know, a generation ship is this concept and it may not be sci-fi, it may be real one of these days, where the ship is designed for long-term space travel, and generations of people live and die on the ship. So it's you could tell tales for over 500 years or something on a generation ship, and then there's different uses or whatever for them. So, but that's kind of the concept here, is that it's a generation ship. They hit a radiation cloud and they have to go dun 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 dun. They hit the radiation cloud and then everything went sideways and pear-shaped.
That's right.
That sounds cool. Well, and I'm looking now. Definitely, it's doing extremely well. The goal was 7,000, just to for the basic minimum requirements to get the Kickstarter to go to make this product, and then it's already raised almost $42,000 with 486 backers. So I think it's safe to say that Starship Warden is a go. Yeah. So
and the cool part is it hit all of its stretch goals. So poor Steve has to think up some new stretch goals, and it's still got like 26 days to go.
That is crazy. So it says the Starship Warden is a sandbox adventure setting written by James M. Ward and Christopher Clark. It is intended for use with the Star Siege RPG, which is a siege engine game now that's free with this Kickstarter. Now, if people don't know, the siege engine is the basic game engine that powers most of Troll Lord Games products. They are doing some stuff in 5e, but their core product or core game engine is the Sage engine, or I always say Sage is the siege engine, and it was what they came up with and developed for their Castles and Crusades game system, which was a lot of people can point to and say this helped kick off the entire OSR movement. It predated a lot of other old school games, retro clones, whatever you want to call them. And so the Sage engine also gets applied to games like Victorious and Amazing Adventures. And now it seems like they have a science fiction version of it called Star Sage. And it's it's an attribute-based system. It's anybody who's played D&D very familiar with it. It's very cool. And that's what's going to power this. Another thing, and I hate to steal just a little bit of your thunder here, Jim, but I want to point out that Kickstarter says if you are loyal to the old Metamorphosis Alpha, don't despair. The Starship Warden is written to allow you to use your original Metamorphosis Alpha rules and begin a lifetime worth of play. And the Starship Warden will be a 650-plus page black and white hardcover book that will retail for $74.99. And the digital version of the book will retail at $20. But you can get it cheaper at the Kickstarter with stretch goals. So and I'm not committing Steve to anything, but the way you guys are blowing through stretch goals and raising money, I mean, it's possible maybe he can do some color, but I'm not committing him or you to that. I'm just thinking out loud. So anyway, so after stealing some of your thunder, is there anything else you'd like to say about the Kickstarter or Starship Warden?
No, I'm done.
Okay. So
it's the one nice thing about it is I've been playing this game for 43 years.
Uh-huh.
And it's been on sale in various mediums. Goodman Games sells lots of Metamorphosis Alpha product plus the original rules. And you can get the original rules on a PDF for like $6 online. So that's super cheap. So it's just something I've been supporting forever, and it's turned out really good. And the Starship Warden book, this 600 and some page book, is going to be like my masterpiece.
This is your crowning achievement. All right. Well, we're going to talk more about your history in game design and your, how Metamorphosis Alpha even happened and how Starship Warden is happening now. And I know there's been many iterations of Metamorphosis Alpha. It's one of the earliest RPGs, and it's had staying power. One thing I like to do during my show is I like to banter with my producer Zach if I can get his attention, because see, Jim, here's the thing, the head of our news team, Sal, his grandmother, now it's not Sal, but his grandmother and her dog Muffin, they get upset with me if I don't banter with Zach. So I got to banter with Zach, and you're welcome to jump in on this. Zach, what's going on, man?
I'm doing fantastic.
Is Mr. J still around? Did he take off?
He's here.
Okay. Well, I want to go ahead and get to the banter segment so that we can keep the muffin factor chilled out. So I got a communication from Muffin via our go-between, the Mobley Detective Agency. And Muffin, this isn't me. Muffin is calling for Mandalorian discussion. So have you seen it yet?
Not yet.
See, you're disappointing Muffin. You're not disappointing. You're disappointing Muffin.
I am, because I am a slow.
I'm just saying, it's not me. I mean, I'll try to do what I can.
The frenzy it's hot right now, but
it's good.
It's good, but next week it's The Witcher, and that's what all my
The Witcher. We'll be talking about. The Witcher comes out December 20th on Netflix, starring Superman himself, Henry. Is it Cavill or Cavill? How do you say it? Cavill. Okay. So here's the main thing. We got the show out of the blue. I'm minding my own business, and Shane Plays got a shout out. So I'm gonna play a little bit of that. And you got a shout out too. So, but the mystery deepens. That I found the plot thickened when I came in today. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. But this is a pod. It's not just a podcast. It's sort of a social media venture that aggregates news stories that people think are important, and then they have a weekly podcast wrap up. It's called This Is the Conversation. And the December 7th conversation, I'm minding my own business and play that clip from the December 7th.
Week here on the weekly wrap-up show with Jay, Cliff, and Payne. This is for the week ending December the 7th, 2019. Shane Plays is a multimedia extravaganza and enigma. It's an actual radio show heard in Little Rock on 101.1 The Answer. It's also heard on the streaming service as well. It is a podcast. It is streaming live, or I guess always live on Krypton Radio a few days after it's recorded. It is put all over the place on YouTube as well. Shane Plays is a multimedia extravaganza and an enigma. It's about a man named Shane who plays various games, video games, role-playing games. He's into comic books, any type of geekdom or pop culture thing, he is all over it. And he spends an hour on the radio every single week talking to some people you've probably never thought you've really needed to know, but some people who are really in the know. He's talked to comic book writers and artists, talked to actual authors of real-time books that talk about pop culture and comic books and sci-fi as well. He's talked to real old-school tabletop game makers, people making tabletop games these days. He's talked to video game makers. He has all the beads on games and fun stuff, and of course pop culture as well. He has a news segment that goes over some of the crazy news of the week, and his producer Zach, well, you got to give extra props to Zach for keeping up with Shane as Shane Plays goes along. He, as we say, every week he's broadcast this live as a radio show, and it gets replayed all over the place. The best place to find him, of course, at his website, shaneplays.com. shaneplays.com. All the links to all the things you need to know, including maybe a few things you don't need to know, and his bad jokes. Yes, there's a bad joke every week, and you can keep up with those at Shane Plays. We put a spotlight on podcasters doing their podcast thing, and this week we put a spotlight on a guy that I like a lot. His name is Shane. He plays games. That's why his podcast is called Shane Plays, and it is our spotlight podcast for the week.
That was nice. You got a shout out too, Zach.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was already like, this is cool. I played it for my wife, and she goes, that's obviously somebody that listens to your show. You know, because sometimes people give you a shout out just because they want social media love or something, but they don't really listen to the show or whatever. Or they'll say, hey, I listen to the show, but they don't. And that's fine. That's just how life works. But Jay from This Is the Conversation obviously listens to the show. And then the plot thickened today, and Jay is Big Bad John. Jay, what up, man? Jay Payne, who helps run stuff up here at the studio. So, man, I just want to give a shout out to Jay, a.k.a. John, and just say thank you for, go ahead and sit in, man. That was very nice of you. And if you want to give people a quick elevator pitch on This Is the Conversation, feel free.
Not bum rushing the show or anything, but it was just because I've heard your show since I came over here. I've heard in bits and pieces here and there. It was something that was a short version of how it became. When I was producing at another station, I was working things and getting everything going on, but working across the glass from a guy doing the morning show and thinking, I'd like to do something like this, but I don't have a script. So I put people to work on social media and let them make the script. So right now we put the website, or we put the stories every 50 minutes or so on Facebook and Twitter, and people just engage with them. And then Friday morning, I aggregate them, put them up.
Based on the engagement, you do the top stories, and then the bottom stories, people that didn't like or whatever. Okay. And it's called This Is the Conversation.
Yes.
So I'll link it in the show notes. If you're listening to the podcast or Krypton Radio version of the show, I will link This Is the Conversation. So thank you very much.
Oh, man. You have a great show. And I've enjoyed, especially 2 weeks ago when I got a chance to actually work on it. Just so happened I had an open slot for who to promote. So why not promote what I just did? It was perfect.
I really appreciate it. And I'm a little worried. Your voice is so great that it's going to work, because Muffin's always wanting to hear from Zach. Now somebody else is out there is going to start demanding you on every show, and which is fine. Got a great voice.
Well, not a problem. I'm always available. If someone wants to hear me, I'll find a way to be heard.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again, man. I really appreciate it. And I hope that, This Is the Conversation. It's a nice concept, and I hope it keeps working for you. So, all right. Back to, if I can keep from choking on, I don't even know what I'm choking on. I'm all verklempt. I'm verklempt from the love. All right, Jim, thanks for waiting. I always like to banter with Zach. There are people that love Zach, and it gives me an opportunity to talk about different stuff that may not be the main topic. But I do want to get back to you. I appreciate so much you coming on the show. And if you don't mind, I'd like to walk down memory lane a little bit and just ask, how did you get into RPGs, and how did you come to make Metamorphosis Alpha?
Okay, that's kind of a fun little story.
Yeah.
The time is 1974. I just graduated from college with a teaching degree. And every Tuesday, I went over to the Lake Geneva News Agency, because they were a bookstore and they would get new fantasy and science fiction books on Tuesdays. So I'm in there and I'm picking up a Conan book, and I'm picking up an Andrea Norton book, and I'm going down the aisles looking at the books, And I turned to my left. No, I turned to my right. And right beside me is this biker dude. He's got a blue jean jacket. He's got one of those great big chain wallets that are so funny. And he has the exact 7 books in his hand that I have.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. We thought that was kind of funny. We started talking about the various authors and what we liked about them. And he said that he had a game where I could play Conan the Barbarian and fight Set.
And at that moment, your whole life went, la.
Right. My whole life changed right at that moment. I was hooked, line, and sinker. I went over to Gary's house the next week, and he started teaching me how to play D&D, and it was great fun. I just loved the game. But I was always a big science fiction fan. So about 2 months later, I said to Gary, you absolutely have to do a science fiction version of this game. It needs it bad. And he said to me, Jim, I don't have time to write those rules. Why don't you give it a try? And it was so cool because he had no idea what kind of writer I was or how creative I was. But boy, I took that and ran with it. And Metamorphosis Alpha happened in 1976.
That is really cool. Now, who was it? I'm assuming that the biker guy wasn't Gary. Who
No,
yeah.
it was Gary guy.
It was Gary. I didn't know he ever went through a biker phase. So
I don't think he rode a bike, but he looked just like
it looked like a bike. So you that is amazing. So you just by chance bumped in to Gary Gygax at the bookstore, at the college bookstore, university bookstore, because y'all both knew that the new science fiction and fantasy stuff came out on Tuesdays. So you basically, and you look down and you have the same 7 books. And
same 7 books. I'll never forget that.
So, and people, that's how people connected before the internet. You would actually, you would have to observe people in their natural habitats. Now, do you happen to remember which any of those 7 books were?
You know, everybody asked me that. Yeah. I don't remember a single one. I was positive that there was an Eld Sprague-de-Camp Conan book, and I was positive there was an Andrea Norton book, but I don't know what the other ones were.
Well, I would say, there's a pretty high chance there was either some Conan or Sword and Sorcery in there if he went, if you would like to be Conan and climb the Tower of the Elephant. So, but,
I know.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
So cool. And then his Greyhawk Castle was just an amazing place to play in. I bet I've been in a couple 100 dungeons since then, and Gary's game has always been the best.
That's the one that you compare to.
Yep.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So you play D&D, you love D&D, but you wanted a science fiction role-playing game, and Gary basically said, well, I can't write it, but if you want one, you write it, basically. Yeah. And you did. So how much of your original draft or original concept for the rules made it into the final product? Was there a heavy editing process, or was Gary and company like, that looks great?
You know, that's the very earliest days of role playing, and there wasn't a science fiction game out there before this, and it had very little editing. I would say 90% of it was just what I wrote up.
Okay, well that's pretty cool. So it got out there. Like I said, it's one of I've started collecting RPGs either based on my own nostalgia from, growing up in the 70s or 80s, or games that I feel are important to the history of RPGs, either because they were the first of something or because of mechanics. And so having that first printing of Metamorphosis Alpha is one of my, crown pieces I have in my collection right now. And it's, I just love looking through that stuff. There's games today, the industry has, grown and refined and whatever for 40 years. So you got all this amazing art and layout and everything, but there's an earnestness and an energy and fun to looking at those original rules, because it was like very much by gamers for gamers. before the industry even really existed at that point. So I absolutely love looking through that stuff. So were there any, you can like a game, but still want to try different mechanics. So I know that you had attributes that we called characteristics. And then you had, combat rules that were somewhat similar to the original D&D. Were there any mechanics that you're like, I really want to try this out? Or like, we don't do this in D&D, but I want to see how this would work in a game or anything like that you tried to work in?
Oh, yeah. The mutations, the radiation mutates bodies effect. I was a big Superman comic book fan, and the different colors of kryptonite and how they the Superman were always fun to me. So I did the exact same thing with mutations, so that you would walk into a mutated area, and if you didn't die, your character mutated and gained a mental or a physical power. And I think those are what keep people interested, because it's fun. It's fun to have superpowers. So that feature has been really good, and that carried over into the first apocalyptic role-playing game, Gamma World, that I wrote a couple of years later. We used the same technique of mutations.
So were you I know you were the sole author on Metamorphosis Alpha. Gamma World is one of the games and franchises out there that I'm aware of, but I've never actually played myself. Were you also sort of a sole creator on Gamma World? How did that happen?
They wanted, again, I suggested that we needed a planet-based game, and so they suggested, Gary and his group suggested, that their publisher Jake Jacquet work with me and help me write the game, and so we both dived in and did Gamma World and got that thing out in the very late 70s.
Now, is it? And I'm just shooting from the hip here, so it may not be a fair characterization. Is it correct to say that the Gamma World is basically Metamorphosis Alpha, but on a planet, or did you refine it further?
Well, okay, so this is where ugly legal things become involved.
Okay.
I own Metamorphosis Alpha. Hasbro owns Gamma World. So I would never say a statement like, Metamorphosis is Gamma World on a planet.
Okay, I understand. All right. But there may be similar characteristics in the gameplay. All right, fair enough.
It's possible.
It's within the realm of possibility. Okay, fair enough. All right. So back to Metamorphosis Alpha, which is, as you've said, it's basically a dungeon in space. You're on a generation ship. There's some similarities to the original D&D game mechanics, but there's mutated humans and some other slightly different variations. The radiation that the ship went through, basically has introduced this very cool, different colored kryptonite, mutation scenarios. And it sounds like a heck of a lot of fun. Now, did you intend it originally to just be a big scenario because it's just one big ship, or did you see it as like something for ongoing campaigns? Did you see it like as a mega dungeon, but just set in space, or was it intended to be more than that?
Yeah, okay, that's a very good question. And again, keep in mind the time period. There wasn't mega dungeons in those days. There wasn't big campaigns in those days.
Right.
In 75 and 76, there was Gary's Greyhawk City and Gary's Greyhawk Dungeon, and that was it. So I had envisioned it as a spin-off of Gary's campaign and to turn it into something that would be, playable for a long time. I didn't envision that people could play in it for 40 years like they have been.
Right.
I've got friends whose characters are still running in the game 40 years later.
Isn't that amazing? I gotta know, how does that make you feel? I mean, I imagine it makes you feel good, but does it just blow you away?
Yeah, I have to tell you, the fact that that game has been still in sales and still selling today, 43 years later, is an extreme bit of pride for me.
I have no doubt for that. That'd be amazing. So it just, it fascinates me. I had the chance to ask, David Zeb Cook this recently as people were talking about, the original days at TSR and literally trying to track down and collect memos from that time for the historical record. What did you were there basically at the beginning. You're with Gary. You guys are playing games, making games. It's a new thing. Role-playing games, fantasy role-playing games, adventure games. There had been wargaming, and you had Brownstein stuff and, the Blackmore stuff. But really, this was the dawn, the genesis, ground zero. What did you think y'all were doing? I mean, obviously you were having fun, but did you think it was a flash in the pan? Or did you think that, y'all were starting something that would have legs?
Yeah, that's a great question. In my mind, and of course, it's just from my perspective, it was just a hobby to us. It wasn't going to be a full-time job until 1980 when it hit big. So it was just a enjoyable pastime, much like stamp collecting or collecting baseball cards.
Well, I mean, just so you know, I'm sure you've heard this before, but I don't think that it's hard for me to express the impact that role-playing games had on my imagination and my fun and just, the things it did for me in my formative years, 10, 11, 12, 13, whatever. I mean, you guys rocked my world with all the stuff you were doing. So, I know for you it was a hobby, and a lot of the really big things in life people don't foresee coming. But you guys just having some fun with a hobby, y'all have literally changed people's lives.
That's true, and that's a bit of pride too. I hear that a lot from people that tell me that their lives changed when they started role playing, and it makes me very happy. Yeah,
it's been a huge part of my way I think, and I'll literally think sometimes when I'm thinking about a situation or a person, I'll start breaking it down to like, well, if that person was a character sheet, what would it look like? Or if this situation was a scenario, what would the rules be? And that helps me think through situations. It's I don't know. Anyway, kind of boggles my mind. So thank you for being in there at the beginning and contributing to all this. Now, one last question I had for you on Metamorphosis Alpha. We need to get to a break. When we come back, we'll talk more about Starship Warden. And I want to acknowledge the multiple editions and publishers, etc., of Metamorphosis Alpha. It started with TSR. It's gone through several versions. And then, as you said, Goodman Games helped carry the torch for a while. And now this Kickstarter for Starship Warden is with Trollord Games. So, but the existing product with Goodman Games will still be out there, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, great. So fantastic. That'll make a lot of people happy. I like the stuff that Goodman does. I was just telling somebody recently how much I love they have these original adventures reincarnated thing where it's a big hardback, and they'll take like Keep on the Borderlands or Isle of Dread or Expedition of the Barrier Peaks, and they'll reprint multiple versions of the original modules in the different revisions, and then they'll give a 5e conversion, and they have articles and stuff in there on history and perspective on the module, and I just love those products. So I got to give a shout out to them. All right, so I just wanted to ask here real quick, only because I'm probably going to track this book down. According to Wikipedia, which may or may not be true, I guess you've said the original inspiration for the game was a book from Brian Aldiss called Nonstop, also known as Starship.
Starship is the version you're going to want. The
okay.
Nonstop one is much, much older. It's the same book, but it got retitled. But Starship's pretty easy to get, and it won't cost you $300.
I got you. Okay. And I assume that's about a generation ship?
Yes.
Okay, nonstop. Yeah, would indicate that. Just going to keep on going. All right. Well, we're going to get to a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more about the Starship Warden, which is it's Metamorphosis Alpha using the Star Sage engine, which is in Kickstarter right now, and it's going kind of berserker. So it's nonstop. Speaking of nonstop, folks, wanted to tell you real quick, and then we'll get to a break. Let me get my show notes open here. My book with Matt Barton, we're both co-authors on it, and it's Dungeons and Desktops: The History of Computer Role-Playing Games, 2nd edition. CRC Press, which is the publisher, is having an end-of-year sale right now. You can get 20% off the book, and includes free shipping, so that's currently cheaper than Amazon. So go to CRC Press and look for Dungeons and Desktops: The History of Computer Role-Playing Games, 2nd edition. All right, Zach, get us to break. When we come back, we're going to talk more with Jim Ward, the creator of Metamorphosis Alpha, also a creator on Gamma World, and we're going to be talking about a new iteration of Metamorphosis Alpha called Starship Warden when we come back on Shane Plays Geek Talk. Are you a fan of thrilling adventure, daring suspense, and just a touch of romance? Cursova has you covered. Since 2016, Cursova has been publishing the very best in contemporary fantasy and science fiction, retro pulp, and for you D&D gamers, Appendix N style fiction. Based in Little Rock, you can pick up their flagship magazine locally or at Michael Tierney's The Comic Book Store on Treasure Hill Road or Collector's Edition on JFK in North Little Rock. Swing by one of Michael's stores and pick up an issue or find them on Amazon. CIRSOVA, doesn't start with a K, it starts with a C. CIRSOVA, Cursova Magazine. Check them out today. And speaking of Michael Tierney's comic book shops, comic book lovers, head to Michael Tierney's local comic book stores for the newest books on the shelves, plus a fantastic selection of back issues. Visit the Comic Book Store on Treasure Hill Road in Little Rock and Collector's Edition on JFK Boulevard in North Little Rock. And don't forget to click on over to the wildstars.com. Michael Tierney knows comics. In addition to being in business for nearly 4 decades and publishing his own comic book series, The Wild Stars, for almost as long and still going, he has written multiple columns for comics magazines and is an Overstreet Price Guide advisor. Michael is also the author of the wildly successful, high-quality, 4-volume labor of love, the Edgar Rice Burroughs 100-Year Art Chronology. Remember, for all of your comic book needs with friendly service, make sure to visit the Comic Book Store and Treasure Hill Road in Little Rock, Collector's Edition on JFK Boulevard in North Little Rock, and thewildstars.com to learn more. Tell them Shane Plays sent you. And last, but never, ever, ever least, I want to go ahead and throw out some love to Game Goblins. Some goblins are your friends. Game Goblins is Central Arkansas's premier retailer of Magic the Gathering, Warhammer 40k, board games, card games, RPGs, miniatures, and hobby accessories. Call Game Goblins at 501-224-GAME or visit them online at gamegoblins.com. That's 501-224-GAME or gamegoblins.com. Conveniently located 1121 South Bowman, right on the corner of Bowman and Canis in West Little Rock, and staffed by friendly employees, Game Goblins has expanded their store size, and there's plenty of room for exciting inventory and tables for play space. You'll like that space because Game Goblins has gaming events every day of the week. For all of your gaming needs, I heartily recommend Game Goblins. Make sure to check out their customer loyalty program that rewards you based on your actual purchases. Game Goblins earns your business and keeps it. First-time customers, mention Shane Plays and receive $10 off your purchase of $50 or more. Tell them Shane Plays sent you. And folks, if you do visit any of my sponsors, please tell them that you hear about them on the show. That helps them know that their advertising money and the relationship we've built is time and money well spent.
Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/Shane Plays.
Shane Stacks on the radio.
Oh, yeah. I love that. Hey, welcome back to Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. We're talking with Warden. Hold on. I was looking at the Starship Warden webpage. So let me back up for a second. We're talking with James Ward, aka Jim Ward, who is the creator of Metamorphosis Alpha, which is acknowledged as the first science fiction tabletop role-playing game. And it has endured from the mid-'70s to today. And the newest iteration, expression, if you will, of Metamorphosis Alpha is a Kickstarter that's going on right now. It's already just blowing the roof off. Jim mentioned that it has broken some records. It's called the Starship Warden. And it is it's basically Metamorphosis Alpha running on the Star Sage engine, and it's already raised buku, $42,000 almost on a $7,000 goal, and it's only went 2 days ago. So you need to get on over there and check that out. Before we get back to talking with Jim about the Starship Warden and Metamorphosis Alpha, I want to throw out a couple of quick show notes. One, if you're listening to the show by podcast or on Krypton Radio or on YouTube or something like that, then the show notes will be up at shaneplays.com. That's ShanePlays.com. Last week's show is out, and that's when we had episode 204, which was Scald Against the Black Priory retro CRPG with developer Al from Norway. That was a fun show, so check that out. Show does go out as a podcast after the live show on the blog, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Podbean, SoundCloud, YouTube, and more. And last but never least, Shane Plays is carried on Krypton Radio. Krypton Radio is sci-fi for your Wi-Fi, kryptonradio.com. All right, back to Jim. Jim, I wanted to kind of focus in on the Starship Warden for the rest of the show. We got about 10 minutes left, something along those lines. But I did want to ask, I always try to give my guests an opportunity to, is there something you never get asked that you want to get out there, or that, you wanted to make sure to mention today? I wanted to give you an opportunity if there's something like that. Cause some of my guests, I talk to them and they're like, man, I always want somebody to ask me this, and they never do. So this is your opportunity.
Okay, that's fair. So MA was the first science fiction role-playing game.
Okay.
Gamma was the first apocalyptic role-playing game. And I just finished a set of rules called GiantLands, and that's the first apocalyptic fantasy role-playing game. So I'm doing lots of new designs. I always like doing fun new stuff. A year ago, I did a thing called Forgotten Ruins with Nick Cole and Jason Anchuk. That's another fantasy set of rules. So I keep real busy.
Sounds like it. So when can we expect to see something with the GiantLands out there?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
GiantLands just finished a Kickstarter. I'm really proud to say we did very well, and so he's planning on printing all that up this month and having them available for sale next month or early February.
And so what is describe what is a post-apocalyptic fantasy? I mean, so it's like a medieval high fantasy world. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
What happens is this. Gaia, the goddess of nature, she wakes up and she sees how bad man has polluted the earth. So she destroys mankind's civilization. And she wakes up the giants and the titans that she had previously put to sleep. And a great big starship that was being built up in the sky crashes on the planet. So basically, we've got giants and titans and the magic of ley lines, and we've got crashed starships and mutants, and they all work together on the world. And the objective for the players is very ecological. It's to clean up the mess that mankind made. So when there's deserts, you're supposed to give it water, and when there's polluted swamps, you're supposed to take out the pollution. And that's all done in a fantasy background with dragons and different character races. So it's a fun new game that I'm really looking forward to. We've already expanded with an adventure, and I just like to keep busy. I'm working on 3 different other projects right now too.
That sounds really cool. Yeah, I'm going to keep an eye out for that. Yeah, you're definitely staying busy. So back to Metamorphosis Alpha and the Starship Warden. So here is some more information from the Starship Warden Kickstarter page. It says the Starship Warden is a project long in the works. Originally, the Starship appeared in James M. Ward's Metamorphosis Alpha RPG, which is, what we've been talking about, published in the bygone days. One might almost say, is it Halcyon? Halicon, however you say that.
Halcyon days, yeah, that's one of my favorite words, actually.
Well, there you go. It's the Halcyon days of the 1970s. It has seen many iterations since then, appearing in countless books and pubs. However, it has never been presented fully fleshed out as its creator, James Ward, envisioned it. Now, for the first time, decades after its creation, the Starship Warden comes to life in all its 17 levels and as its master architect designed it. So if I'm reading this right, this is the first time that the full ship as intended, the dungeon in space, as you put it, is being published.
Okay, so in the first set of rules, I drew up by hand 17 levels, and they're very crude, and they're little egg-shaped maps in the rule book. But my good friend Chris Clark did an amazing job transmuting those levels into great big full-size paper maps with hundreds of encounters on them. So we've gone from Mickey Mouse the cartoon to Snow White the
Right.
anime.
I gotcha. Yeah.
In our production.
So you've gone from a short to a feature-length film.
Yes, exactly.
That's great. So, is it fair to describe this as like a huge and I don't mean this is good. I like this kind of thing. Is it you're talking about all these encounters on every? Is it like just a huge dungeon crawl that's a spaceship crawl, or is there or like what kind of? And obviously, any group can bring any kind of gameplay that they want to a game, but like, how is it intended? Is it intended to be a, let's clear every area and solve puzzles and fight monsters, or is there an overarching sort of narrative thing going on?
Okay, that's fair. The overarching thing is to get the ship back on track.
Okay.
And in the beginning of playing the game, you don't even know you're on a ship. You're on a level that's 50 miles long and 20 miles wide. You think that's the whole world.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
It's going to be a big revelation during the course of the game. And basically it's a science fiction version of a dungeon crawl because there's so many encounters and so many puzzles to solve. And they're all very doable. I mean, I've play tested this thing for over 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of a lethal world, but like Gary played the game, and he only died once the entire time. So his character, only died once.
Right. Huh.
Yes.
Okay.
It's just a voyage of exploration inside a huge ship.
So you slowly come to realize that you're actually living on a spaceship and that something's gone terribly, horribly wrong. And eventually you're going to try to, I guess, fight your way to a computer control room. I don't want to know, actually. I don't want to spoil it for people, but I'm just kind of...
Okay, on the 10th level of the ship, there's the command bridge. And the command bridge was designed with security protocols in mind. So if you're not in an armored spacesuit with a ton of weapons and maybe a couple robots in front of you, you're not getting to the command chair.
So do you have any future plan? I mean, obviously, this game, this setting has been going for 40 years with no stopping. Again, no pun intended with the Don't Stop or whatever the name of that novel is. That's, you said Starship's the good version to get. Do you have any plans for like after they get things back on track and get to a planet or something? I mean, how far do you plan to extend this universe?
Yeah, just between you and me and nobody else.
Nobody else.
I want to do a Metamorphosis Alpha planet.
Cool. And it's and hopefully so. We've got to wrap here in a couple of minutes, but I did want to ask, what are some of the cooler mutations that you like?
Oh, my favorite one is Life Leech, of course. It absorbs 6 hit points from everybody within 20 feet of the mutant.
Nice.
I just love it. The good ones. Radiated Eyes is a lot of fun because if it doesn't kill you, oftentimes it mutates you. If you're a human, you don't want to be mutated because while you're a human, robots will obey your orders. But the second you become a mutant, robots don't obey your orders anymore.
Well, that's fun. All right, so last question before we got to wrap. How did, and I know this is a big question to compress down into just a couple of minutes, but how did you end up connecting with Trollord Games and Steven Chenault and those folks to do this Under the Star Siege?
Oh, okay, that's a very good question. Basically, a long, long time ago, Steve really liked the hardbound book Deities and Demigods.
Mm-hmm.
The AD&D hardbound book. Are you familiar with that?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so he wanted a book like that. So he called me up and said, Jim, I would like you to do a book called Of Gods and Monsters. That's pantheons, just like the Deities and Demigods book, but with C&C stats.
Okay.
And so I turned it in early, which he says he never gets products turned in early by any designer. And the role-playing elements, I really pumped up the role-playing elements in it, so it made it kind of exciting. And that became one of their best-selling products in the history of the company.
Nice. And then of course, there was the huge kerfluffle with having Lovecraftian Cthulhu mythos stuff, so then y'all had to revive. I'm joking. Obviously, that was the original Deities and Demigods.
You're pressing a really ugly button there, buddy.
Yeah, all right. Well, I'll just back away from that. Although I think Lovecraft's in the public domain now. I know there's a lot of stuff going into the public domain.
I got so ripped by that. That whole thing was a terrible situation for me.
Yeah, I'm sorry that happened.
I got the rights from Moorcock for Elric and Arkham House for Lovecraft. I got those rights. But the foolish guys in those two companies also signed a role-playing contract with Chaosium. So they naturally said, we own the rights.
Oh, see, I didn't realize it was that pear-shaped. I just thought, yeah.
So they took out the 2 pantheons in the book, and then I said, well, I'll be happy to do 2 new pantheons free.
Right.
And they said, oh no, we don't want to bother.
I'm sorry about that. Sorry to poke that old wound, but it's
sorry.
It's
the only really bad thing that ever happened to me at TSR, besides getting fired.
Yeah.
Well,
a lot of, unfortunately, as things went on, there was some bad stuff at TSR, and I hate that people that were there at the beginning doing such amazing things got caught in the middle of all that. But I'm glad that you've been able to do all the cool stuff that you have. And, with this stuff in the public domain now, it might be interesting to see what maybe could be done in the future. Well, I like to end. Jim, thanks so much for being on. I wish I could talk to you longer, but radio is radio. So we got to draw to a close. I always end with a bad joke of the week. So I picked this one out just for you, given the different eras that you've worked in. The past, the present, and the future walk into a bar. It was tense. Thanks. All right. I got to wrap us up. Thanks so much, Jim. Everybody else, we'll catch you next time on Shane Plays.
Earthship Ark, man's greatest and final achievement, out of control, drifting through deep space over 800 years into the far future. Its passengers, descendants of the last survivors of the dead planet Earth, locked in separate worlds, their destination long forgotten. Heading for destruction unless 3 young people can save the Starlost.
Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.